the author of several books. She's just logging in as we speak. Yeah, Alexis Green joining us in the neighborhood. Let me get my questions ready. I'll remind you that Alexis used to write for Theater Week, for which I used to write as well. She's written the book Lucille Lortel, Queen of Off-Broadway, and short biographies of people like Christopher Durang and I should call you Dr. Green because you actually have a doctorate from City University of New York in theater. Yay. She has taught drama criticism at NYU and Marymount Manhattan College. I didn't even know NYU had drama criticism classes. Should have taken them. But Alexis Green, I'm going to ask you to unmute your microphone and then say hello to all of us, and then we will chat. So just do the unmutey thing. I know you're looking for it. Excuse me.
You can ask her on mute.
I just did, yeah.
I'm now unmuted.
You
Yes,
are, you are indeed. Welcome to you, Alexis. How are you?
I am fine, David, and it's wonderful to be here this morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you too. Now, where you live in this beautiful area, right? You're not in Manhattan right now. Where are you? Or you go up to upstate, or you have
No, I'm in Manhattan on the Upper West Side.
Oh my gosh! So how has the pandemic been for you in terms of just life and also being a published writer?
Well, actually, in 2020, when it all began, um, it allowed me to concentrate and write and finish the book, Emily Mann, Rebel Artist of the American Theater. And so I didn't mind the isolation because I had a project. That
Did you
does help.
finish the book quicker than some of your other books because you weren't going to the theater, you weren't going to concerts, you weren't traveling? You could just work or basically same amount of time.
Well, I got to tell you, I started writing this biography in 2014.
Whoa. Okay. All right. Does it normally
So,
take that long to do a bio? Because that's why I've never wanted to tackle one of these things. It just seems like the Sisyphean rock to push.
well, it is quite a project. I mean, there are people who have written, 10 biographies. I don't quite know how they do it. Uh, but I started in 2014, and yeah, it takes a lot because you travel, you go to libraries, you go to interview people. I went across the country to interview some people, and it
Now, was
takes.
this your idea initially, or did someone say, "Hey, somebody should write a biography of Emily Mann. It ought to be Alexis Green because she writes about women playwrights and blah 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 blah." How did it?
That is a wonderful question. It was my idea. I'd written a biography of Lucille Lortel. Oh, thank you for
Okay, yeah, it's just
showing
okay.
that. I'd written a biography of Lucille Lortel back in the early 2000s, and I wanted to write another biography because it is really a wonderful form. And also, there are not many biographies of contemporary American women in the theater. There just are not. And so around 2014, and I backtracking a little bit here, I've known Emily Mann a long time, since at least 1983, and interviewed her for articles, and we've been on panels together. And so I sent her a LinkedIn message in 2014, like, hey, what would you think of this, of my writing a biography of you? And she, sent a message back, that would be great. And there we were.
Yeah. So let me ask you. At that point, you had the idea. You wanted to write the book. Did you have applause on board at that point, or did you have to send them an outline of précis, or how did you get it? It's one thing to say I'm going to write a book. It's another to say it's going to be published and in bookstores by the time of the holidays.
Okay, so uh, this is a long story. I started out with the university press, actually,
Okay.
and that did not work out for a number of reasons. University presses, some of them are quite wonderful, but also they ask for subventions, and they don't give much, if any, of an advance.
Right.
In other words, they want you to put in money to help them publish your book.
Okay. Well, I mean, there are academic presses that we have a scientist friend who publishes all the time, and it's amazing that legitimate, serious academic journals, especially for the hard sciences, it's like, oh yeah, not only is it vetted, not only do you have to have it, with editors and people looking it over and stuff, but you're paying like thousands of dollars to get it. It's self-publishing, and you get all the pain in the ass of having, being a real publishing thing. It's
Right.
like, whoa! Did you have that with your press, whom you're very carefully not naming?
Well, they wanted me to cut a lot of words, and at that point, my editor Philip Turner, who is a wonderful editor and also became my agent. He's a great agent, and we just talked with each other and said, "Look, we can do better than this." And so he found applause for me,
Right.
and which has been great.
Did you
And
have to make it a less academic-y? But I mean, did you have one idea? Well, it's academic press, and it's going to be footnotes and whatever, and this and this, and now like it can be more for a general audience, or was it really the same book?
I don't write academic ease to begin
Good.
with.
Yeah.
Um, I just don't believe in it. And if I may say so, and people who have responded to the book who have already read it have said it's a wonderful read, if I may say so.
You may say
And
so. Yeah.
and so there was very little editing on that score from applause. You
So
know,
let me ask, what? First of all, give us the outline. We haven't really. I've kind of backed into this for people who don't know about the book. For people who don't know who the heck Emily Mann is, just give us the basic précis and make us want to read this. Who is Emily Mann? What has she done? Why her?
why Emily Mann? Well, she's an extraordinary playwright, I think, and a fine director. And for 3 decades, from 1990 to 2020, she led the McCarter Theater Center in Princeton, New Jersey. She was the first woman to be hired to lead that theater, which had existed since the late 1920s at least. And there have been many firsts for Emily Mann as a woman in the theater. She was the first woman to direct on the main stage of the Guthrie Theater in 1979. So she's been a model for women in the theater. And on a human level, on a personal level, she's had many challenges to face. She's had multiple sclerosis, which she has dealt with for a long time. But as she says, and I quote her toward the end of the book, that's not that's really just one more thread in the weave now. It's been in remission for decades. She was sexually assaulted. So there are many aspects to Emily Mann. She is an extraordinary artist of the theater, I believe. And she is also a woman whose life I hoped I portrayed in a way that will uh, attract, readers
To her life
to
and to
what
her
goes,
work.
to what women have to deal with, not only in the arts, but in general American culture.
We should say that one of her plays, excuse me, is the Broadway hit "Having Our Say,"
Yes.
about the Delaney sisters, the two African American sisters, and some of her other works that people might know are.
I think Execution of Justice, people might know, possibly on the West Coast in San Francisco, because it's based on the trial of the gentleman who murdered Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone of San Francisco. And actually, at the moment, there is an off-Broadway company here in New York City called Playhouse Creatures Theater Company that is devoting its entire 2021-2022 season to a retrospective of Emily's plays. And at the moment, they're screening a virtual presentation of Execution of Justice.
Now,
And
I also want to ask a question in terms of you're kind of friends, I would say, with Emily Mann, right, at this point, certainly, and a respectful
sure,
biographical friend. When you say, okay, I'm writing this book, does she get to read the entire thing before it's published? Does she have any say of being able to say, take this out, or are you like, love you, thanks, it won't be a book without you, Emily, but my book.
she did not. I did give her manuscript to read before it went to be published, but she did not have final approval.
Right. Okay. Because I can't tell you how many. No, it's still a finite number. But when I do interviews and you get in with someone, you start talking to them, and then after the interview's over, especially if it's pre-recorded, you get a call, usually from the manager or the agent. Is that bit you were talking about? She really shouldn't have brought that up. She shouldn't have brought that up. Can you just? And then I'm in the position of either being the asshole who leaves it in, or the censorious person who takes it out and was probably the best part of the talk. So yeah.
It's not a hagiography.
Cool.
Am I pronouncing the word correctly? Hagiography.
I'm not sure, but I know what you're saying. And so what's a bit of dish that that's negative about her in the only bio of her?
I wouldn't say that there is anything necessarily negative about her. People are people, and sometimes they behave better at certain times than at other times. And so, some of those times are in there.
What does she see as her greatest achievement?
What does she say is her
Yes.
greatest achievement?
What does Emily Mann say is her own? Because it may not jibe with your idea or with the world's idea. Oh, well, she had a show on Broadway. Boom. Or she ran the McCarter for,
That's an interesting question, and she has never expressed that to me. Maybe she's expressed what she thinks her greatest achievement is to others. At one point in the book, I do quote her saying to me that what she may be most remembered for is her plays. Because to some extent, that's the nature of theater,
Now, have you ever did you ever try to write a play, Alexis?
Yeah, when I was about 10 years old.
Do you remember what it was about and what it was? And
I don't actually, but I'd have to go back and think about that and get back to you.
Well, but you entered theater, at least the realm, professionally in a journalism capacity, a critic, a writer, an interviewer.
No, I whatever that play was back when I was 10 years old, I don't think it was, I think we put it on in school. I went to the Dalton School at the time, and whatever happened, it was not the biggest shit in the world, and I decided to be an actor instead.
Did you?
I started out as an actor.
Did you go to university? I know you have a doctorate in theater for it, but were your doctorate at that point wasn't for performance, was it? No.
Oh, no.
No.
And I went for my doctorate when I was in my 30s.
So where did you go for undergrad work, and what did you?
Vassar College.
Yeah, where?
Vassar College.
Dalton Vassar. Woo! Alexis Green, my Dr. Green in. So do you feel on some level, not in terms of like white privilege or anything, but you feel that you had a privileged upbringing in terms of being able to go to these Tony kinds of schools? Or are they overrated?
When you ask if it's a privileged upbringing, are you using privileged in a positive or a negative sense?
Both. Either one. Well, I mean, well, positive in the sense of, it gave you a leg up, and like my wife has, went to Columbia University, and that gives her a bit more street cred than she has from even the place that she got her doctorate, right? Because Ivy League, Columbia, you say the word, it's like someone goes to Harvard or Yale. There's a thing attached. So you say Dalton or you say Vassar, and I mean, it's Wendy Wasserstein land, is it?
Wasserstein, she went to Wellesley, I believe, or Mount
Oh, I'm
Holyoke.
saying
I
that.
forget which. Um, you know, they were good schools. I had a fine education at Dalton, and a good education at Vassar. I think Vassar is probably now a stronger school than when I went there. It's co-ed. There are more people of color there. It was a fairly white school, you know, when I was going. Uh,
I was
no,
wondering where you were going with that, with questioning the word privilege. Now I understand because you were thinking, oh, is he saying about this kind of? Yeah, okay. So, because one of the things that you point out for Emily Mann was that she had to get out of the whole white enclave thing, and when she got to Chicago, from it was Massachusetts, the family went to Chicago. She suddenly felt she could breathe. One of the reasons being she was going to college with 20% black and people from other places rather than like 5% or 2% or tokens, as it were. Was that an awakening for you when you came out of this sort of enclave thing and went into the world of New York and New York theater?
um, I've always thought of theater as a very supportive family. That was one of the things I loved about it, and still do love about it. And it was not as diverse then when I was trying to be an actor as it certainly is now, but it did open a world of very, very different people
Right.
than those I had grown up with or gone to school with. No question about that.
What was your career trajectory at that point? So you got out of college, and it's not like you suddenly got,
I came to New York
yeah.
and I, you know, went to auditions. I read backstage. You know,
Were
uh,
you in any off Broadway shows?
yeah,
Like,
um, I was in an off Broadway, a couple of off Broadway productions, and an off Broadway production at the Roundabout when the Roundabout was still in the basement of the supermarket over in
on
the West.
17th Street, was it? Or, yeah.
I was the artistic director.
What show was it?
Uh, his wife had written, or he and his wife had written an adaptation of Oedipus Rex set in the Caribbean.
How was it?
And Gordon Heath, uh, who was an African American actor who had been on Broadway but had ended up living in France because uh, perhaps he could not get as much work here as he wanted. He was Oedipus
Oh my! And you were joking.
Ismene.
Oh, whoa! So that's a pretty good gig, but it didn't. You at some point you had to figure. I need to have an income. I need to have a different life than this.
Yeah, people would say to me, "Well, I mean, I just couldn't get cast enough, you
Right.
know." And
As 97% of actors cannot. Yes. Okay.
right, and so people would say to me that I was kind of a character ingenue or a character actress, and I just had to, sort of grow into my face, grow older and grow into my face. And I'm sorry, I can't wait that long. So
Well, was that a
I
big
went back to school.
for to get into the academics?
Well,
Yeah.
I started writing in local newspapers, and then I went back to school to get a master's in theater and ultimately a PhD.
Now, what were the focuses of that? Because theater is a very broad term. So, was it in dramatic literature, criticism, in set building? What were your concentrations?
My dissertation was on off-Broadway theater during the 60s in New York City.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty great, and that's probably. I mean, you can go read that still if you go to like the Library of Congress.
Oh, people, believe it or not, people still, you can download dissertations these days from the internet, and people still download that dissertation.
And they cite it, I'm sure, in their.
I hope so.
Now, I want to also. I held up this book before. You also worked. Well, can you see it? It's the.
Yes, I see it.
And this pissed me off, I have to say, a little bit. I don't know if I wonder if you had whatever about future printings or something. Because The Lion King. Ooh, Pride Rock on Broadway. Look who wrote it. Oh, Julie Taymor. Julie Taymor. Wow, she's a busy person. It's amazing she took all this time to write a book. Let me just find out a little bit more. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Look at this. Yeah. Julie Taymor. Oh, when ALEXIS GREENE. Did that when you saw the cover of this, were you like, I'm not a ghostwriter. I kind of belong on the damn cover.
Yeah, I had a lawyer friend talk with them to get my name on the book.
Yeah.
So, but that's water under the bridge.
Well, let me ask you though, in a book like that, where it is a collaboration, because this one, obviously, you couldn't have done this book without chatting with Emily Mann for hours and hours on tape and stuff, and then people she knew and doing all the research. With this book, sure, it's also a collaboration. How much was you, and how much was Taymor?
It's a lot of it was me, but of course they let me sit in on rehearsals. I do remember, interviewing Julie at her home quite a bit.
But it sounds like the actual writing.
That's a hard question to answer from this distance.
No, but it really sounds like you essentially wrote the book and put it together. But Julie Taymor sells the. We're nodding, but you can't legally. You can't say I wrote the damn book, as opposed to like the Lucille Lortel book, which again is you. That's your book. You did the work. You interviewed.
Oh, completely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now she was alive when you were doing that book, so
no.
Oh.
She had passed. She had already passed.
So again, was that a
for a long time? The estate asked me to write that book. It was an authorized biography. Lucille had always wanted a book about herself, and the estate felt, probably correctly, that it was best to wait because she would have wanted it a particular way, and this way.
You could tell the truth, but you tell the whole truth. She had kind of an interesting life. What is like the most weird thing or the funniest thing in researching and writing that book? Lucille, what? That made you go, oh my goodness, what a great story.
Wow. That really takes me back. I think I remember learning or researching about her early life and her wanting to be a film actress and not being able to make that happen. And
97%, yeah.
Yeah. And she was quite stunning looking when she was younger, Lucille. But it didn't work out. And she married a very rich man instead.
I think there were worse things. And he allowed her to be the Diane.
That is true.
Now you also, sorry.
And I'm not giving her enough credit because, and of course she started the White Barn Theater.
Right, yeah. I mean, you can marry for money and then just live a very pleasant, rich life, or you can marry for money and then start foundations and things and start theaters. I mean, for sure. Let me ask you also, you've written, this is kind of a great idea of like I want to read a biography that's longer than a wiki page or a wiki thing, or just, but I also don't want to read like a 400-page thing. You've done a couple of those about some other playwrights, like was it 100 pages or less they're called, or of Durang and well,
Essentially, I think the work there amounted to writing, introductions to,
oh.
yeah, to those books.
Also, those books were what? Were they mostly excerpts of their plays? I haven't seen
Yes,
them. Oh, I
that's
like
right.
what they were short biographies that
Yes,
were,
yeah,
yeah, but you
yeah,
wrote intros for
yeah.
those books. So, can I ask you also? You've this totally came out of the blue, but it's on your website. I mean, so you write about theater, and you write both. For the major marketing about theater, you've written academically about theater, and all of this, and biographies. Oh, and true crime. Where did that come from?
Oh, where did that come from? What a fascinating question. My husband and I have a cabin in upstate New York in a section of the Catskills called the Southern Tier of the Catskills. And the Catskills, as you may imagine, uh, has been very fertile territory for murders and other crimes.
Well, I know a lot of comics up there who just killed, but no, that's a different thing.
And I discovered a story about a woman named Bessie Wheeler who may or may not have committed suicide. Perhaps she was shot in 1910. Uh, she was a domestic and she became pregnant, probably by uh, a young man in the household where she cleaned and, did the laundry and took care of things. And so the question is the case of Bessie Wheeler, suicide or murder. And again, it involved research, which I love to do, and talking with people in upstate New York. I also love to interview people. And so,
Well, how did you? I mean, this happened in 1910. It's not like
yes.
you could have had witnesses, or I mean, you must
Well,
have
there were
like
witnesses,
microfilm.
but there was an inquest, and there are, transcripts of an inquest, and there are, local newspaper uh, reporters who covered it.
Wow, wow.
And I also visited the house where this took place. And the man who owns the house now welcomed. He didn't know about this history.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, now they have to disclose when something like that happens. You can't sell a house if some horrible event happened there. The real estate agent has
Well,
to say so.
um, this was a long
It
time
was
ago,
1910, yeah.
and
What is the name of that book, by the way? What is the name of the true crime book? Is it Bessie Wheeler what or
the story is called "The Case of Bessie Wheeler: Suicide or Murder," and it of itself is not long enough for a book. So I'm trying to write a couple of more stories to go with it.
is that your next major project, or are you mulling another biography, or what?
I think that's my next major project. Yes.
We have the inside scoop here on Dave's Gone By. We're talking with Alexis Green. We have just a couple more minutes with you, but I do have a couple more questions for you. You have seen the sea change, not just in arts journalism, but in journalism in particular. And you've been a theater critic. You used to write for Theater Week a lot. What do you feel about the quote unquote democratization of theater criticism from like these ivory tower people at the major dailies and the occasional John Simony weekly to like go on the internet and read everybody's review of Jagged Little Pill?
That's a hard question to answer. I think, unfortunately, what has happened with the reduction of print newspapers, for instance, and magazines, that there are fewer calls for the sort of theater review that I used to write, that appears in the New York Times, or, for instance, that Chris Jones writes for the Chicago Tribune and the New York Daily News. Theater criticism used to be an art form in its way. It's not easy to write an interesting, readable, perceptive theater review. And it's also, as a biographer, as anybody who's some sort of historian, to go back to theater reviews is very, very valuable, because the best theater reviews actually describe what took place on the stage, the setting, the lighting, the music, the acting. And so while I think, in one sense, it's great that people can get online and and give out their views of a show that they've seen, and I'm sure that um, the more that happens, perhaps the more it draws people to go see that show. I do think what we've lost in terms of losing professional theater criticism is unfortunate.
Okay, it's a pretty reasonable thing. I don't know where it's going to wind up, how the circle will eventually turn. Have you written theater? Do you still go to the theater in New York as a professional? Do you just go sometimes when there's a show you want to see? How connected are you to Broadway now that it's coming back?
I've been going more to off and off Broadway productions as opposed to Broadway, but that's basically, of course, the pandemic, that
Right.
has
Well, have you
everything.
seen anything post-pandemic? Have you seen anything since March 2020 on, off Broadway in upstate New York, Connecticut, Jersey?
Um, Upstate New York, I subscribe to the Glimmerglass Opera,
Ooh, okay.
which is in Cooperstown.
Yeah, yeah.
And they performed outdoors. They erected an outdoor stage this past summer, and so I saw everything there. And I've seen a couple of off-Broadway presentations and productions since coming back to the
Well, what was your
city.
favorite? Well, when you went off Broadway, did you have a one that you really liked? The one that was made an impression on you?
Well, these were very short-lived. Yeah,
Well,
I saw
off
something
Broadway
called
was.
Statue Fest, which is a series of short monologues about women who should be on pedestals,
Okay.
who are not, written about very much. And
Well, I could
uh,
see that would attract you as a theme. Was it good?
yes,
Or is it, oh, okay.
and it was very nice. It was at in a small house off Broadway, and everybody was wearing a mask, which was a little strange. But it was good to be with a group of people again.
Right. Now, let me ask you, I want to remind people one more time that we're talking with Alexis Green, the author of several books about the theater, including Lucille Lortel book and the Lion King, the name should be right here, with the Julie Taymor book, and of course this brand new one, just in time for Thanksgiving, just in time for the holiday giving season, ladies and gentlemen, and since it's from Applause Theater and Cinema Books, you can get it in all the places that you get books, from the Drama Book Shop right on to Amazon. And also, there's more about it, more about Alexis Green at your own website, which is alexisgreene.com. And there's the E on the end of it, Greene. So it's alexisgreen.com. So if you want to find out more about Alexis and also getting her new book and some of her old books, please do go there. Alexis, last question for you. Do you have a favorite play or production of all time?
Favorite play or production of all time? What a wonderful question. This really dates me. One of the first productions I ever saw was a revival of Peter Pan, believe it or not,
I believe it.
with Mary Martin. And I think it was at the City Center. I'm not sure about that. And I loved it. Cyril Richard, especially.
Oh
He
my God.
was just amazing.
Well, he's
I fell in love
no
with him.
Christopher Walken, but he'll do his book. And I'll bet that stayed with you. It was, I mean, Peter Pan's a pretty magical piece of work, and you know. Did you ever see Mabel Mind's Peter and Wendy? That was magnificent. If you ever,
I don't think I never saw that. No.
oh, that was something because it takes Peter Pan, keeps it in context, but then pulls it into a whole different. It was a masterpiece, and unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever see that again. Maybe it's at the library. Since you're a research person, I'll bet they're recording it at the Performing Arts. Well, Alexis, you look great, you sound great, and you're obviously writing great. Everybody get a copy of Emily. I just did a Joe Franklin move right there. Everybody get a copy of Rebel Artist of the American Theater, Emily Mann, from Alexis Greene. Stay well, stay writing, stay thinking, stay criminal if you're going to be dwelling on that true crime stuff. Alexis, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you, David. This has been great.
us. Okay. Have a great one. I'm gonna let you go, and thank you for being in the neighborhood. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Alexis Greene, everybody!